So this is Religion Part 2, the second short lecture on religion. And it's going to cover the rest of those items in that long list of things in the definition of religion in your textbook. Okay, and so the first video, we talked about how religion is a social institution, how it has, religions always, everywhere, always have sacred stories and symbolism and immeasurable beings, which would include spirits and gods and goddesses and all of those kinds of things. Tricksters are spirits that you'll read about in your textbook, like the sock monster in your washer and dryer machine. You put your load of laundry in and you know that your socks are in there, but when you get them out of the dryer, maybe one of them is missing and you never see it again. And so some people, we answer the question of, where did my sock go? We answered the question by creating this immeasurable being called the sock monster. I guess you can measure it slightly because you know that two socks went in there and only one of them came out. And so maybe that's a way to slightly measure that being, but it's definitely something that we explain away where our socks went to. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about is more things on that list and talk about how religions usually have special places associated with them. And certainly in Christianity in America, you probably know about lots of different churches or cemeteries or things like this that are considered sacred ground or special or holy places. However, places worldwide also exist that go with particular religious denominations or even different religions around the world. For instance, Jerusalem is one of those places in the world that at least three major religions see as sort of one of the birthplaces, at least, of their religious tradition. So you have Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all claiming a piece of Jerusalem's history and power structure and, depth of artifacts and history that's in Jerusalem. So there are places all over the world. Bethlehem is a place that you hear about in sacred stories in Christianity, for instance, or Mecca and Medina in Islam. And so religions always have special places, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, we're not necessarily talking about a church building, for instance, but we're talking about special places like regions of the world that are commonly called the Holy Land, for instance. Sacred ground, for instance. You've heard that term before, especially among Native American groups, refer to certain regions within their reservations and territories as sacred grounds, sacred hunting area, for instance. And so religions always have sacred places associated with them. Another thing that religions have is special powers are associated with religions, and not only special powers that are associated with religion that you can get or have bestowed upon you by religion, but a lot of times there are special practitioners that are associated with getting that power. So maybe a shaman or a medicine man has some sort of particular communication technique with another realm or the godly realm or the spirit world or something that enables that particular person's powers to influence uncertain situations, uncertain outcomes. So there's always a way of addressing the supernatural or the otherworldly beings and things, immeasurable beings that are part of religious belief. There's always a way to address that, whether it's through prayer or rituals, chanting, sacrifices. Those kinds of things are always a way of addressing the otherworldly beings that are part of religious belief systems. And that is often done to evoke power over something. I know that when my mother was diagnosed with cancer is a big scary thing, but we have a ton of answers about what cancer is and why it is and how to treat it and that kind of thing in science. And so when the doctor came out and told all of us, your mother is dying from this, this kind of cancer. I mean, he didn't say it that bluntly, but we kind of all knew That's what the general theme was. That's what the talk was that we were having. He told us about these steps that we were going to take moving forward. This is what we're going to do next, and we're going to try this, and we're going to do this, and we need to make sure that this happens. And he gave us a plan, marching orders. If you want to bring the military into it, it was like marching orders. We're going to move forward this way in order to, if not get your mother well, then make sure that she is as comfortable as possible in the time that she has, while battling this disease. And, he didn't leave it there. He told us all these scientific things, and he gave us our marching orders, like I said. But at the end, he said, and I would advise you to pray. Well, why? He was a scientist. But he also believed that there might be some sort of way that we could influence uncertain outcomes that were in the future. So in other words, prayer is a way that many of us often try to skip over the middleman, like the special practitioner that's part of the definition, skip over that middle person and try to maybe get help directly from above or beside or whatever kind of place you want to describe it, but to try to affect an uncertain outcome. So there's powers associated with religion, and therefore religions have rituals, special methods to try to deal with those powers or to address the supernatural that have these powers and can share them with us if they so desire. And there's also special practitioners of religions who are usually seen by members of the larger group as having like a closer relationship to the powers of that religion, and therefore we can also go to them for advice or for help, or maybe if we get them to help us with the rituals or with the sacrifices or with the prayers, maybe it'll be more special, maybe it'll be more effective in getting the outcome that we hope to get. So there's powers, there's ways of addressing the supernatural to kind of get those powers in our favor, and there's special practitioners that are always a part of religions so that we have like an expert to go to. Whether you're talking about a priest or a shaman or a medicine woman or a nun or a preacher or an imam or a rabbi or a monk or any of the other kinds of denominations or other kinds of religious positions that and names, titles that are held in other religious traditions other than Christianity, of course. Those are the special practitioners of the religion. There's always a way to address the supernatural, and there's always powers associated with it. Okay, religions also associate states and qualities as part of it. Now, when I say a state, I'm not talking about Arkansas or Mississippi or Louisiana. I'm not talking about states like that. I'm talking about conditions, sort of like a state of grace. Being favored or the favored one is a state of being. Being blessed is a state of being. And so there's always states of being. Cursed, there's a state of being that is a religion, kind of superstitious or religious nature, that kind of quality of being. State of being. Qualities is another thing. Qualities are also associated with religions. And so think of qualities, instead of being like in the state of grace, think of a quality as something like holiness or evil, like a good versus bad sort of thing. There's always qualities. Health or illness, those kinds of things are often associated with religion and religious conditions and reasons. And so those are qualities that exist. Being in a trance is a certain state that some people, that some religions, believe in. Or being able to speak in tongues is a certain quality that some religions believe is bestowed on some of us when we are close to or in close communion with, certain spirits in the in another realm or God in another realm, for instance. So there's always states of being associated with religions and qualities of being also. Okay, so another interesting part of the religion definition is that it is a way for people to address change. Now, a lot of times, and when you read in your book, you'll read a lot about how religion helps maintain the status quo. That means that it helps maintain the social order and the norms the way that they always have been. It sort of is used, and some people analyze religion and religious belief systems as a method for people who have power to be able to control people who don't have power and keep them, doing and plodding along and, contributing to society in the way they've always contributed to society, rather than, rising up and rebelling and trying to get better conditions for themselves. So a lot of times people analyze religion as a method to prevent change from happening. But sometimes change is inevitable. Maybe a natural disaster like the tsunami in Indonesia or in Japan, or huge earthquakes or something, or fires or landslides or something like this. And so when enormous changes happen, or colonialism, an army from a foreign nation comes in and marches, into your territory and changes everything for you, like immediately and abruptly. Religion also offers a way to either cope with that change that's forced on you, or explain away why that change must have happened. So I remember a couple of years ago, there was a terrible tornado. There seems to be lots of tornadoes all the time in Oklahoma and Arkansas. And of course, it's all over the news media, and you just see city blocks and entire neighborhoods just flattened. I remember a school in Greenbrier, I think it was, in Arkansas, was just completely flattened a couple of years ago with a huge tornado that came through. And I remember the news media was there asking people questions, like recovery kinds of questions. How are you gonna deal with this, and what are you going to do? And people just basically said, they were stunned, they were numb, they didn't really know what to say, because it was such a shocker that their house used to be standing in front of them and then now nothing was there. And so often, whatever reporter was asking them a question, what do you do next? So often they turned their reactions toward dealing with the supernatural, communicating with the supernatural. Well, I'm going to pray. I know that this must be something in God's plan. He hasn't revealed it to me yet, but I'm going to pray about it. And all I know is I escaped with my life. And we immediately go to those religious answers when change occurs, whether it's macro scale change or micro scale change. I told you that my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Well, she ultimately died from that disease, like so many people fall victim to that disease. And we prayed constantly that she wouldn't. But when she did, we didn't stop praying. We simply prayed for the strength to go on and for help to understand why this was part of God's plan that we just didn't want to happen. But it did. So, we kept on plodding along. And you'll read in your textbook also when huge coups, groups take over governments or invade areas and annihilate certain populations, the people who are left behind quite often either turn to existing religions, or new religions and ways of coping pop up all around them in order to be able to try to cope and deal with that change without literally going crazy. It's kind of like a defense mechanism to a large extent. So these are the qualities of the characteristics of religions that exist all over the world. There are usually components of each one of these things from this definition of religion in any and every religion you can find all over the world. And so that's the way we look at religion in anthropology. We analyze it for these components, and we ask people what they believe and what their rituals are and how they think, and we listen and we participate and we observe and take part in religious practices to try to better understand them from the standpoint of somebody in that particular culture. And that's how we look at religion. So it's not a controversial thing at all, although we acknowledge that people make controversy out of it and people use it as a reason to fight all throughout history. So it's very important to people, in other words. And so we have to be cognizant of that and be accepting of that and learn about it in a non-ethnocentric way when we're reading about things in this chapter. Enjoy it. Let me know if you have any questions.